Your patient's blood pressure is 96/40. MAP sitting at 58. Heart rate's 128. And when you put your hand on her skin, it's warm, flushed. The pulses under your fingers are bounding, not thready. If you've watched HEMO 1, you already know the reflex. Low MAP, 2 levers. The pump or the nozzle. Warm and bounding tells you the pump's fine, maybe even cranking harder. So the lever that failed is the nozzle. Today, we zoom all the way into that nozzle because it has a name, a number, and a reason it moves the way it does. This is HEMO 3, systemic vascular resistance. Quick map check. HEMO 1 gave you the hose, pump, and the nozzle. HEMO 2 opened up the pump, preload, afterload, contractility, and rate. Today, we open up the nozzle. After this, what all that flow and resistance is actually delivering. Oxygen delivery, HEMO 4. SVR, systemic vascular resistance, is the resistance the whole systemic circulation puts up against blood being pushed out of the left ventricle. Some texts call it total peripheral resistance. Same idea. And here's the detail that trips people up. You never measure SVR directly. You calculate it. Let's run one. MAP is 85. Your CVP is 5. And your cardiac output is 6 liters a minute. 85 minus 5 is 80. 80 divided by 6 is 13.3. That's SVR in older units. Millimeters of mercury times minutes per liter. Sometimes called PRUs. To get the number, your flow sheets actually print 9 seconds per centimeter to the fifth. Multiply by 80. 13.3 times 80 is 1,067. That's a normal resting nozzle. Exam tip. Miss that times 80 and you're off by 2 orders of magnitude, an 80-fold error. If your answer looks too small to be a real SVR, you probably forgot the conversion. Here's the part worth sitting with. Systemic vascular resistance and cardiac output are usually the independent variables, and your map is what results with them. It's tempting to treat SVR as some downstream number map produces. It's actually the reverse. The vessels set their own tone. The pressure is what falls out of that. Quick one. If cardiac output goes up, but map stays flat, what has to be happening with your SVR? Pause it. SVR has to be dropping. Flow is rising, the pressure it's generating isn't. So the resistance against the flow came down to compensate. Flow up, resistance down, pressure is flat. Hold that shape. You'll see it again in a minute. So, which vessels are the nozzle? Blood moves from the aorta through large arteries into small arteries, into arterioles, then capillaries. Most of that path barely resists anything. The aorta is practically a fire hose. The pressure drop concentrates almost entirely in one segment, the small arteries and arterioles. Somewhere between half to 2/3 of that entire pressure fall from your aorta to your right atrium happens right there. Why arterioles specifically, and not the capillaries downstream or the big arteries upstream? Poiseuille's relationship. Resistance is proportional to length and viscosity, but inversely proportional to radius. To the 4th power, not squared, to the 4th. That exponent is the whole story. Double a vessel's diameter, and you don't cut its resistance in half, you cut it roughly 16-fold. Half it, and resistance climbs by that same factor. Arterioles are small. They're the most numerous resistance vessels in the body, and their smooth muscle is wired directly into the sympathetic nerve endings. So a tiny change in radius, driven by a nerve signal or a hormone, produces a huge swing in resistance. That's your nozzle, mechanically. Pearl. Length and viscosity barely change minute to minute. Radius does, constantly. That's why arteriolar tone, not vessel's length or blood thickness, is the lever your body actually pulls to move SVR. What turns that radius up or down? Sympathetic tone acting on alpha receptors is the fast lever. Circulating hormones, angiotensin II, from the renin-angiotensin system, catecholamines, vasopressin, add sustained constriction. And the vessel wall itself talks back. The endothelium releases nitric oxide and process cycling to dilate, and endothelium 1 to constrict. A constant local tug of war on top of whatever the nervous system's telling it. We're not dosing any of this today. That's the vasoactive series, just naming the levers that move the nozzle. Now back to your patient. Shock states split cleanly along this exact axis. Say her numbers come back. MAP is 60, your CVP is 2, and your cardiac output is 8. 60 minus 2 is 58. 58 over 8 is 7.25 times by 80, 580. A markedly low SVR, with a normal to high cardiac output doing the work. That's the hemodynamic fingerprint of early, warm, septic or distributive shock. The nozzle fell wide open. The pump's not the problem. It may even be compensating. Flip it. Cool, mottled skin, thready pulse, narrow pulse pressure, low urine output. Pump or nozzle? In which direction does SVR move? Pause it. Pump. In hypovolemic, cardiogenic, or obstructive shock, cardiac output is what's failing, so the body clamps the nozzle down hard, sympathetically and hormonally, trying to protect the MAP. Run the math. MAP is 65, your CVP is 15, and your cardiac output is 2.5. 50 over 2.5 is 20 times 80 is 1600. A markedly elevated SVR, not the primary problem, but the compensation for one. Cold, clammy, mottled is cold shock. Pitfall. Don't assume every shock patient has a low SVR. Only distributive shock starts there. Hypovolemic, cardiogenic, and obstructive shock typically show the opposite. A high, compensatory SVR. One more wrinkle before you anchor on warm equals septic equals safe. Septic shock itself can progress from warm to cold as it worsens. Catecholamine reserves and the endothelium both start failing, and the same patient who is flushed and bounding can end up cold and clamped. Warm isn't a permanent address. It's a stage. Not every septic patient gets there, but it's a trajectory to watch for, not assume against. At the bedside, absent a PA catheter, you're reading SVR indirectly. Skin temperature and color, capillary refill, pulse character, and pulse pressure. Warm, bounding, wide pulse pressure points, low SVR. Now, cool, mottled, delayed refill, narrow pulse pressure points high SVR. But narrow pulse pressure can also mean low stroke volume. Read it alongside the whole picture, not as a number on its own. One more pass. SVR is the nozzle from HEMO 1. Calculated, not measured. MAP minus CVP over cardiac output times 80 for the units on your flow sheet. Arterioles run the nozzle because resistance rides on radius to the fourth power, and shock splits on this exact axis. Distributive drops the nozzle open. Warm, bounding, low SVR. hypovolemic, cardiogenic, and obstructive. Clamp it down to compensate. Cold, clamped, high SVR. Same low map on the monitor, opposite lever, opposite treatment. 1. What's the times 80 for? And what happens if you forget it? 2. Why does a small change in arteriolar radius swing resistance so much more than the same change upstream in a big artery? 3. Your patient starts warm and bounding and ends the shift cold and clamped. What happened to her SVR? And did the diagnosis change? Answers are pinned in the comment. Next on the map, HEMO 4. What all this flow and resistance is actually for. Oxygen delivery. I'll see you there.